Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Good. I can tell you are in it here. That was not much of a power pause. I can really tell the season is almost here. You don't have time to wait. We're kind of out of off-season mode now, so time to get right down to business and talk about news that is going to probably largely officially break on Monday. So we better beat the coaching staff to the news here.
Exactly, because these videos and audio files can take a long time to upload. What I don't want to do, and we're going to be deciding and making our picks on all of the position battles. What I don't want this to do is just to be uploading while Ryan Day is making his announcements on Monday. So we can get this done sooner, quicker. We don't need to delay. Time, let's not delay. I don't like delaying. We need to move on. Enough with the delaying. Let's talk about some position battles, Tom. And there aren't a lot. And frankly, in some of the position battles, it's not really a battle, it's a team effort. But first, I guess we should just start with quarterback. We have everybody on this planet that follows the quarterback battle at Ohio State is expecting an announcement on Monday. And that's generally when it happens. You've got the second scrimmage in on Saturday. You've got as much information as you'd like, and now you can start moving forward with a starter. So, Tom, are you gonna surprise everybody here, or are you going to go with the favorite?
Well, I don't know. I'm going to go with Julian Sayin. Is everyone surprised? I bet they are. I bet this is shocking development for everyone. Sorry, everyone, to shock you. But yes, I think from the start of fall camp, we've sort of had Monday, August 18th circled on the calendar as we're going to be talking to Ryan Day. We're going to be talking to Brian Hartline. This feels a lot like the day when this probably gets announced because you have your two scrimmages. You've taken in all the information you need to take in. And at some point you got to kind of make a decision. You've got two choices and one of them is to get off the pot. And so this is the day when they have to kind of get off the pot and make a decision. And then you've got a week of fall camp and then you shift into game week mode. And you give the guy who's number one the chance to be the number one guy, get the number one reps, all that kind of stuff. You've given it enough time to be able to have enough data to make an informed decision. And everything right now is pointing to Julian Sayin, starting quarterback, 2025 Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And one of the other factors is throughout this camp, what we haven't heard, which is something we've heard in the past, is you've got one guy ahead, and now the other guy's ahead. Like with Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, there was jockeying, and it's like, well, I heard today that this is this and that is that. With this competition, after maybe certainly the first practice where Julian Sayin was like, boy, it was up and down for him, and Lincoln Kienholz looked like the better guy that on day one. Since then, I've not heard anything that makes me think this is other than Julian Sayin. In fact, it just continues to be this picture of Julian Sayin ascending and solidifying the job. So yeah, I'm expecting him to be named a quarterback on Monday. If he isn't, Tom, is this a cause for concern? Is this, you can ask Ryan Day, is this a statement about Lincoln or is this a statement about Julian? And he'll just say, well, I don't want to get into that. So Tom, I'm asking you, if there is no starting quarterback named on Monday, is this Lincoln's fault or Julian's? Who do I blame?
Listen, I don't know. Are you new to these internets? You don't need to pick just one person. It can be everyone's fault, Tony. That's the way we do it now. If there isn't a decision, then that tells me that Sayin isn't quite where Day wants him to be, and it's maybe a little bit of a motivational thing. As you said, you haven't heard, boy, Kienholz has really made a move and he's ahead of Sayin now, and you haven't heard that. And so you haven't heard, boy, it's really, really neck and neck and it's really anyone's race. You haven't really heard that for a while either. Like you said, going back to that first day when it was like, oh, Kienholz had a really good first day, and then day two, it was kind of like, okay, it's probably more Sayin. Day three, Sayin, they had a passing drill they did, and everyone kind of went, well, Sayin was clearly better in that one. And you haven't really heard anything to contradict that since then. So if anything, it's a motivational thing. I would be pretty surprised if there wasn't a starter name, though.
Running back is a situation where I had somebody ask me, or somebody tell me that another site was saying that, don't be surprised if CJ Donaldson is pushing for starter carries. And it's like, well, that's why he came over. This is why they saw what happened last year. And whether he is the Travion Henderson or the Quinshon Judkins in terms of carries, did you consider Travion Henderson a backup because he had like 40 fewer carries than Quinshon Judkins last year? I think this is a position where there are co-starters, and one guy may get a few more carries per game. I would not say that to Carlos Loughlin because we've tried, and he doesn't like it when you just say these two guys. But I don't see this as a situation where there is a starter or a backup per se. Like, yes, somebody's going to start, but they're both the kind of guys who could start and also be the guy that comes off the bench and also plays all of the fourth quarter.
Right. This is one where if James Peoples had slightly more carries than CJ Donaldson, even 15% more carries, 20% more carries than CJ Donaldson, I wouldn't be surprised. If James Peoples and CJ Donaldson had functionally the same number of carries, I wouldn't be surprised. If both guys are healthy and CJ Donaldson is getting the vast majority of the first half carries, is like the true bell cow kind of starter, I'd be pretty surprised at that. Mm-hmm. But this to me feels like they looked at last year and said, that worked out real well, having two good running backs so we could trust to do all the different things you need a running back to do. We should do that again. It feels a lot like this is going to be a run it back kind of situation because the coaching staff saw the benefits of that last year. But maybe even more importantly, the players saw the benefits of that from last year, where you got to the end of the year and Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson were far fresher and far sharper than you ever saw running backs in the past who, were the 25, 30 a carry kind of game running backs. Players are, I think, on board with this. Coaches are on board with this. I think this is very much a co-starter situation. And if, one of these guys gets 10% more carries than the other, that's fine, whatever. I think functionally, though, it's going to be very, very much a more or less split it down the middle, and these guys are all going to be fine with it.
Yeah, I would agree. Here's a position that I don't know that there are really any position battles, and that's wide receiver. We essentially know who the top six are. We know the starters and we know the backups. But Tom, as camp has gone on, I keep getting the sinking suspicion, sinking feeling that it's going to be more 4-man rotation than 6-man rotation because we've not heard. You're not hearing as much anymore about Mylan Graham or Quincy Porter being in that top 6, and so I'm wondering, is there not enough being done there? Are they not making enough plays at this point for them to be playing? Certainly against Texas. I'm wondering how many snaps you see Mylan Graham against Texas, if any. I do think you'll see Bryson Rogers in there. I think he's number 4 pretty solidly, and he can play any of the positions. And any of those 4 can play any of the positions, which I think makes them more likely. But your thoughts on the rotation? I know it's not necessarily a position battle, but where are you in terms of how many guys are going to be playing right out of the gate?
The top 3 is very clear to me. Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes and Jeremiah Smith, not necessarily in that order. And then Bryson Rogers as the 4th guy, I think is very clear. And then it feels like there's a little bit of a drop-off. There's probably a little bit of a drop-off from 3 to 4 and another drop-off from 4 to 5 between Bryson Rogers and Mylan Graham. And then, is Quincy Porter 6? Yeah, probably. But I'm going to set the over-under on Mylan Graham snaps against Texas at 8.5. What do you think?
I'm going to go under that. And that may just be because I'm not hearing enough, and maybe that's doesn't mean he's not doing well. Maybe it's nobody's telling me. So that's kind of where I am right now. But there are still time. The game is not tomorrow. There Correct. Is still time, and so we will see, of course, on that one. Looking forward to it. I just want to find out.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that might impact the number of snaps for wide receivers 4 and 5 and 6 is the next position that we're going to talk about, which is tight end, because you look at 3 wide receivers and okay, you're going to play a fourth, but it's like, boy, they're not going to play those 3 wide receivers 60 snaps a game. No, they're not. But it might not be because the 5th wide receiver is playing, because you might be in a bunch of 12 personnel, because, the depth at tight end this year is almost unprecedented in Ohio State history. And I think you're going to see a lot more 12 personnel, because 12 personnel doesn't mean it's just the top 2 guys. You're going to have more of the 3, 4, maybe even 5 tight end guys playing those, meaningful snaps there as well.
And sometimes I lose track of just how many tight ends there are at Ohio State, because I'm thinking in my head, I wouldn't be shocked if there were more tight ends that played than wide receivers. But it's like, well, you would need at least 5 tight ends.
Yeah.
And we know they've done that before, but with veteran tight ends. And we could see 5, but I also think you're probably going to see 5 receivers against Texas as well. Like Mylan Graham in there somewhere. Somebody needs a break, whatever. But again, tight end's a position where they are competing like heck, but it's almost like you've got Max Clare is the, if you want to call him the slot tight end or whatever. And then everybody else, and Will Kazmarek is the run blocking tight end. And like those 2 guys can play either spot, and then everybody else can play in those spots as well. I just see this as basically like 4 or 5 starting caliber players in that group. So it's like, yeah, they're all competing. I just see them as kind of this one, Voltron type of thing. Like they're all part of some larger machine.
Yeah. You've got your guys who have different roles potentially. Like you said, that Claire and Kazmarek may have slightly different roles, but they're both going to play, and they're both going to play at the same time. But you put Jelani Thurman, you put Bennett Christian. I mean, those top 4, I think, are almost kind of like there's a little bit of separation. There's a reason we're talking about guys 1 and 2 before 3 and 4, but also there's not much of a drop off from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. And I don't know that I'd even necessarily say this guy is 3 and this guy is 4, because they may be more guys who are fitting those roles again. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, yeah, from 4 and below, there's more of a drop off because there's just not as much experience there. But it's a group where like you said, if there were 4 wide receivers and 4 tight ends who played, I would not be shocked. If it was the same number of wide receivers and tight ends who playing in the Texas game, even 5 and 5, where someone comes in and plays a snap here or there, that wouldn't completely shock me. That is a room that we don't talk about it enough, but the job that Keenan Bailey has done in that tight end room is phenomenal in terms of recruiting, in terms of development. Like he's someone that has been on the staff and has worked his way up. He is not someone who came in with the, I'm Brian Hartline. I played in the NFL. I'm James Laurinaitis. I played in the NFL. Keenan Bailey is not some former college football star. He's much more in the Carlos Loughlin kind of do it, building your career from scratch kind of mold in terms of a coach. And man, he has worked his way up from the bottom, but man, he is really, you can see why people are so high on him and why he's gotten the opportunity to keep growing his career, because between the recruiting and the development, Ohio State is not, Ohio State is, people talk about Ohio State being wide receiver U. I don't know that anyone outside of the Ohio State tight end room has ever talked about Ohio State being tight end U. They'll talk about that, but it's, the long running joke about Ohio State coaches forgetting that they have tight ends. Like there's a reason that that's a long running joke. All of a sudden, this is a room that doesn't have that incredible history of, tight ends with 800 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns in a season or any of that kind of stuff. They don't have a Tyler Warren to point to. But man, he has turned what was a just kind of forgotten position group into one of the real strengths of this year's team. And he really does deserve a shout out for that.
Well, Tom, as you know, it is the year of the tight end.
That a fact?
Some people joke about it. We live it. We talk about it. We celebrate it. This is what we do. Mm-hmm. And again, the proof is right there on the field for the Buckeyes.
I have my year of the tight end tattoo right there. I can't show you because I'm wearing a hoodie, but it is. And a list of the years below it as well.
Right. Yes. It's like the Browns quarterback jersey.
But positive. Yeah.
Jinx. All right. Let's go ahead and throw left tackle in there just real quick. this seems like it's going to be Austin Seerveld. It's been Austin Seerveld for a while now. Do you see anything changing there, or can we move on?
No, I think we can move on. This is one where you kept hearing, they're looking at him at left tackle, and it was kind of like, yeah, okay, sure, you're cross-training positions, that makes sense. And then you kept hearing it. It was like, so you're still cross-training, huh? It's like, well, and he's still there, you say, huh? Interesting. And we have had folks on our board saying, like, what does this mean for Ethan Onyanwa that he's not the starting left tackle? It's like, I don't know that it says anything bad about him. I think it says that Austin Seerveld has done. You're an Iron Buckeye in the winter. You're an Iron Buckeye in the summer. You're named a team captain. And then you're also moving to left tackle, and you're the starter at left tackle. And that seems like it's a fairly uncontroversial position. That feels like that says a lot more about Austin Seerveld than it does anyone else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Since you brought in Ethan Onyanwa, let's just bring in the rest of the conversation, because he and Philip Daniels are competing at right tackle. Ethan Onyanwa is also moving around to guard as well, so maybe that's involving Tegra Shabola at right guard. As we look at these things, it's like, well, now it's Tom, this is your idea for the show. You wanted, hey, let's put our foot down and make our picks because we've got a quarterback decision. That's fine. That's great. What we don't have right now, I don't think we need to go and say who the right tackle is or who the right guard is right now. It's too early, but you have locked us in. And a lot can change. Hey, Tom, you know what? I'm just going to throw this out there. This is just what we're hearing right now. Things can change. The news can change. The facts can change. Anything can change. As Rocky said in Rocky IV, if you can change and we can change, we can all change. I think at this point, and I've been wrong about the offensive line so many steps of the way in terms of everything seems set. So I love the fact that you want to be like, all right, let's set it. Let's do this. I think right now I would go with Philip Daniels at right tackle because that's what he's been doing, and he seems to be doing well, and everybody loves him. Right guard, I guess I'll stick with Tegra because he's been there longer. Ethan Onyanwa's only ever been like a tackle for the last 3 or 4 years. So to expect him to win that job, I think in the span of, say, 3 weeks is a lot. To expect him to be able to play it, though, I think is not. And so maybe if something happens, I kind of see him as being able to be that swing guy, the Brandon Bowen, Donovan Jackson, whatever. If he can be either one of those guys would be fantastic for Ohio State. So I think I'm going to stick with Tegra Shabola at right guard, then I'm going to go Philip Daniels at right tackle. Tom, are you going to lock yourself in, or are you going to be like, you know what, I'm going to save my pick? I think it'd be too early right now to go ahead and throw my picks out there.
Well, I got to leave people something to look forward to in the bold prediction show. So when we do that the week of the Texas game, I will I think maybe I'm going to agree with you right now in terms of, the balance of probability is that you have that correct there. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked you about wide receiver. Ethan Onyanwa over under, we'll just keep the same number, 8.5 snaps against Texas for Ohio State. Because I think you're going to see him. We have seen that they're perfectly happy to rotate players. They did that all to the college football playoff. They rotated guards. I think you could very well see sort of a shuffling and a rotation, and whether it's situational or whether it's just, well, we're going to give this guy this series or whatever, but over under 8.5 snaps for him in the Texas game. Or how about this? Over under 8.5 snaps for the non-starter in the Texas. How about that? Maybe that's a better way to frame it. I would go over, because I think you might see a couple of snaps of just 6 offensive linemen to get a push. And these are some big dudes now, and he's an extra big dude to get him out there. But I suspect there could be some rotating, and they've not done it at right. They've not done it at tackle. They've done it at guard. And so maybe this is a way to ease him in at guard. Some is to rotate and see how it goes. But seeing how it goes is not something that a head coach normally likes to do against Texas. However, 19 years ago, Jim Tressel threw a second-team offensive lineman out there in the first half against Texas, and they marched down the field and scored a touchdown in Austin, which is something that Jim Tressel would do. It's all right, let's throw the 2s out there. And it's like, are you sure? Because you really only got like 3 of them. And then the other 2 are of the walk-on status. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But, I'd go over 8.5. I'm fascinated to see how that will go. I did ask Tyler Bowen if he was opposed to
doing a rotation. He said he's not opposed to it. He's done it before. Just up to the players being able to go.
Yeah, and I think that this is a year where, a lot like we talked about with Keenan Bailey, a combination of Tyler Bowen and Justin Fry need to kind of get their flowers as well in terms of the depth that they have in that offensive line room, where this is not everyone's pulling their hair out and it's like, boy, we don't know who the five are because only three guys can play at all. Like they have been in that spot in recent years, not necessarily at this point in the calendar in recent years, but they have been at that spot in recent years. That's not at all where they are right now. If Ethan Onyeonwo was the starter at right tackle or left tackle, you get the sense that they would probably be okay with that right now. It's just they seem like they maybe have better options or at least comparable options. So, yeah, I think if you're looking at the ones and even the twos, I think they're probably feeling pretty good about at least 7 or 8 of those guys, at least, and maybe even more than that, which, for as much panic as there has been about offensive line recruiting and development over the last few years, that feels remarkable for them to be in that kind of spot right now.
Let's go to another deep room. And again, I want to talk about defensive ends because this is one of those positions where we don't need to talk about starters. I want to emphasize that this is a position where you don't talk about starters. You talk about what your depth is. Now, last year, when your starters are so much more experienced and I guess a higher level than your backups, then you can do that. But generally, ideally, you don't just have 2 starters defensive end. You've got 3 or 4 or 5. And I think that's the situation that Ohio State is expecting this year. I would say, though, I feel like Logan George got banged up early in camp and really haven't heard much from him. So I'm wondering how ready he is going to be for Texas in terms of not health-wise, but are you ready for Texas? Like, are you ready for this? Mm-hmm. You can suggest the same thing to CJ Hicks as well. This is a new position for him. But I just see a bunch of co-starters, Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, who I'd throw Bo Atkinson in there. And I will remind people, Bo Atkinson started 1 game last year, led the team in sacks and tackles for loss. Would you not consider him a starter? So like, that's where I kind of get into this whole thing of co-starters. Yeah, you started the game, but did you finish the game? That sort of thing. And Bo Atkinson, he started 1 game last year, but is anybody going to call him a backup? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. If you lead the team in sacks, and that team, by the way, was North Carolina, in case you forgot where he came from. But if if you lead the team in sacks or you're even in that conversation, you're functionally a co-starter. And this is a room where you've seen Larry Johnson rotate guys there it's remarkable when he didn't rotate guys. We still talk about the 2023 Notre Dame game because it was JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer every game. And it was like, what is going on? This is crazy. Larry's not rotating guys. And really since then, they've been rotating guys. So yeah, I would expect number of snaps. I'll say Kenyatta Jackson and then Caden Curry and then Bo Atkinson and then maybe CJ Hicks and then Logan George, something like that. But, probably if everyone's healthy, you're probably looking at least 8-10 snaps for everyone and probably no more than 35 or 40 for anyone because you're going to try and keep guys rotating, keep guys fresh. But Kate, we've heard great stuff about Kenyatta Jackson and seen some great stuff from Kenyatta Jackson all year. We've heard great stuff about Caden Curry over the last month or two. And, Bo Atkinson came in. I would have been a little surprised if you had told me when they first announced that they were getting Bo Atkinson that he was not going to be starting over maybe Caden Curry. I would have been a little bit surprised at that in the spring. And it's not that you've heard, Bo Atkinson turns out he's bad, actually. Like, no, that's not the reason. It's just, it feels like Caden Curry entering his final season has really taken, another step forward. And same thing for Kenyatta Jackson. So, yeah, this feels like another position group where they're feeling reasonably good about not only the quality, but also the quantity of players they have available.
Yeah, I think you're going to have 3 guys who are all similar in terms of snaps. Maybe Kenyatta Jackson has 10 more than anybody else, 10 or 15 more, who knows. And then it just kind of trickles on down from there. The last position I want to talk about is safety. And this is just so interesting to me because Caleb Downs is your free safety. He can play strong safety. He can play nickel. Jalen McLean is the other strong safety. Malik Hartford is the other free safety. Ideally, everybody can play any position because they need to be able to move around a little bit. From what I've seen, I guess I would just go Jalen McLean at strong safety, and Caleb Downs plays his free safety spot. That's what I think is starts. But I think all three safeties play. I think Malik Hartford plays and plays some good minutes, and that won't necessarily take away from what Lorenzo Styles does at nickel either. I just think they really like these three safeties, and they're going to find a way to get them involved as best they can. And the more you do that this year with Malik Hartford, the better off he's going to be next year when he is the guy, because Caleb Downs is off to the NFL. So I say in the first defensive possession for Ohio State, you've got Jalen McLean next to Caleb Downs.
I think I would agree with that. And I don't think Texas is a team that's necessarily going to have the depth of wide receivers where you're going to be playing a bunch of dime, where you have the three safeties out there, plus you have Lorenzo Styles out there. I think you're going to see that look at times this year. I think you're going to see, as you said, McLean and Downs as your starting safeties in that Texas game. But I think you're going to see McLean and Downs. I think you're going to see Hartford and Downs. I think you're going to see McLean and Downs and Hartford, and maybe not Lorenzo Styles sometimes. And you may see the three of those guys and Lorenzo Styles sometimes. And I'm not talking about, in the fourth quarter, they're going to, no, I think you're going to see this in standard downs in the first half of games against opponents where they're, Ohio State's not a 42-point favorite. I think you're going to see a little bit of everything, because if they can mix and match, if they can use that talent to sort of confuse the opposing quarterback, they're going to do it. And they have the fact that Caleb Downs can play pretty much anywhere you want him to. Like if you really wanted Caleb Downs to be your will linebacker, I am quite confident that Caleb Downs could do that. He gives you such an opportunity to mix and match and create confusion and put him, where do you think the ball is going? Put Caleb Downs there. That feels like something that Matt Patricia is going to make, do the very best that he can to take advantage of that. And that's going to involve a lot of mixing and matching. But yes, long story short, yes, I'm agreeing with you on McLean and Downs being the first two safeties out there on the first snap.
And I do also think you will see McLean and Hartford at safety together, and then Caleb Downs as the quote unquote nickel at times, but also that's a Sam linebacker. So it just depends on who they want to have out there. And is Peyton Pierce out there as well? And is Sonny Styles or Arvell Reese on the line? There's a lot of different moving that you can do where it looks like one thing while the quarterback is huddling or whatever. And as they get to the line, it becomes something else, or after he makes that, makes his calls or whatever, it becomes something else, and you move around, because Caleb Downs, I think, he can be that Sam and be that nickel, whatever you need in there. And it's a good problem to have, but I am interested to see how that goes and how well they actually play the safeties around Caleb Downs. So there you go. We've let you know way too early.
Whoa.
Oh,
Speaking of good problems to have, Tony,
Yes.
Ohio State has not one but two Australians on the team. Who, Tony, takes the first snap at punter this year? Nick McClarty or Joe McGuire?
Well, here's the thing. Nick McClarty just lost his stripe and his black stripe, and it took a little bit longer than most, but of course he's Australian, so give him some time to acclimate to the country. All right. My thought was at this time a year ago, Ryan Day said, yeah, Nick McClarty, I think is going to be our punter. Ended up being Joe McGuire. So you're like, well, he just needs to get more consistent and know what they're going to get. And so I was thinking, maybe now this is going to be the year that it's Nick McClarty. I mentioned that on the message board, the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. And somebody chimed in and was like, well, I was watching the punters the first 3 days of practice, and Joe McGuire was the more consistent guy. And it's like, you're dedicated. If you're locked in, you're getting there early and watching the punters. And I appreciate the info. So, but that was a couple of weeks ago. Joe McGuire has done it. Nick McClarty has the higher potential, but it still comes down to consistency. They want to know what they're going to get every single time. And if it's not as much as they'd like, but they still know what they're going to get, that's the preference. So with Texas on deck, don't you go with the guy that you know you're going to get what you're going to get? Now, has Nick McClarty been perfectly consistent in the last 3 weeks? Then you go with him. I will say, Tom, I'm going to side with safety and caution and say Joe McGuire.
All right. Well, there you go. So there's Tony's prediction, and also bearing the news that Kirk Ferentz, member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. So there you go. It's you get access to, or you think it was Jim Tressel. I mean, he's busy. No. He's got a new job. I don't think it's him, but it could have been him. Possible.
So who are you going with?
I feel like we've agreed too much on this show. So I'm going to say Nick McClarty. So therefore we can really take, have something to fight over week 1.
Yeah, I feel like we don't generally embrace debate around here, but when it involves Australians, we will do that. That's no problem doing that one. So there you go. Thank you all for tuning in. Now you know who will win all of the starting position battles, including Punter, since I've let you know. If you want to hit the thumbs up on this, if you're watching on YouTube, we'd appreciate it. And of course, you can find us on all of your podcast platforms of choice. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.